What is up, YouTube? This is 82 and 0. So, continuing on, we're hearing a lot of talks nowadays about the worst trades in NBA history. Sometimes people reference James Harden being traded to Houston, or recently I've been hearing more about Jaylen Brown and Tatum to the Celtics, which were acquired from the Nets draft picks. Although I think that has a good case in itself, I've always thought that the dumbest trade ever in NBA history is something that, oddly enough, doesn't get talked about much anymore. I've only heard it come up in a few circles. So, and I'm sure a lot of people probably don't even know this, right? So, Bill Russell was originally drafted by the St. Louis Hawks, which are today the Atlanta Hawks. He was the second pick overall in the 1956 NBA draft. Now, the problem was the city of St. Louis during the time was very segregated. And Bill Russell didn't want to play there because he knew how difficult it would be to play. I'm not saying Boston was like this great city either, but he knew how bad it would be. And another thing is, people were going to protest. There were people that were saying, and by people I mean the fans, were saying they didn't want to see Bill Russell play there. So they ended up trading him to the Boston Celtics for Cliff Hagan and Ed Macauley. Now, Ed Macauley is a Hall of Famer. He's a 7-time All-Star. And I think one of the reasons why St. Louis was on board with this is because Ed Macauley was already an established star at this point. And he's from St. Louis. So he's like a hometown hero, so to speak, Somebody that I think during this time when teams were trying to market stars that were from those towns, he's somebody that could appeal to them. And Cliff Hagan himself was a Hall of Famer. So maybe you guys are thinking, well, what's so bad about that? They traded 2 Hall of Famers. Well, Cliff Hagan himself hadn't even played yet. The 56-57 season was his rookie season too. So he wasn't an established star. But here is why it's the most lopsided trade in NBA history. Because the Celtics taking Bill Russell, they would win the championship that year. Not only that, they would win 11 championships in 13 years. And they set a winning culture, for generations to come. It wasn't just Bill Russell. After this, you had John Havlicek in the 70s winning. You had Larry Bird in the 80s winning. The Hawks only won 1 championship. They won in 58. That's it. So, I think a big NBA what if, what if Bill Russell, and I can see this playing out in 2 different ways, but what if Bill Russell had stayed with the St. Louis Hawks? I can see it playing out 2 ways. I think he could have retired early, like let's say played a season or 2 and then called it quits, just because of the segregation that existed in St. Louis, just because of the racism. And the Hawks organization itself was not a very progressive organization. Part of what made playing for the Celtics so good back then, or I shouldn't say so good, but manageable, was the Celtics organization was progressive. They stood by their black players. Even if they knew they were going to lose fans, they stood by them because they knew it was right to keep drafting black players. The Hawks organization, I want to say they're probably the last team to integrate. And that 1958 Hawks team that won, they were the last championship team to not have a black player. So, how different would things be? Like I said, I could see him retiring early. Or another scenario is being the guy that Bill Russell is, what if he stuck it out? What if he used, what's the term I'm looking for? He used the discrimination and everything he felt and channeled it on the basketball court like he did in Boston. And he kept playing with it, the Hawks up into the 69 season, which was his final season for Boston. How many championships would the Hawks have? Because the Hawks already had Bob Pettit. How unstoppable would the duo of Bill Russell and Bob Pettit be? I think, Boston wouldn't. Maybe this is a stretch, but I don't think Boston, as good as those teams were, because they were very deep teams, I don't think they would have won any championships. And I know that maybe people are going to criticize me for this take, but I don't think Boston would have won any of those 11 championships had Bill Russell not played. Yes, I know Bill Russell wasn't the sole factor behind these championship teams, because you had guys like Sam Jones, John Havlicek. But I think if you take away Bill Russell, they don't win any of those championships. Now, how many would he win on the Hawks? Well, I don't think he would win 11 championships with the Hawks. The reason why I think this is I don't think their team was as well constructed. Although Bob Pettit would have been a better second co-star than anything Russell ever had, Bob Pettit didn't play, up into the late 60s. I think his last season was 64, 65. So Russell's window of time to win championships, which I do think he would win a lot, would be the earlier 60s. You'd kind of have to see how they would build the team around him. Yes, I know in the later 60s, they were able, like after the 64-65 season when Bob Pettit retired, I know they were able to get back to being at least contenders. Like, for example, the 67-68 season, they had Lenny Wilkens and Mo Beatty. But how does this championship roster stay with Russell there? Because it's almost a domino effect when you do what-ifs. Would they have Zelmo Beatty? Would they have Lenny Wilkens? Because you got to understand, if you keep Russell there, it makes the team better. And if the team is better, they may not get the same draft selections that they had in real life, in the real timeline. So, I don't really know that that the Hawks would keep winning into the late 60s, because I don't think their organization was as strong at finding talent as the Celtics. But I think one thing that would have changed with this timeline, I don't think the Hawks would have ever left St. Louis. Maybe I'm wrong on that, but I think if Russell would have played there, maybe this is a wrong take, but I think he would have put asses in the seats enough that they wouldn't have wanted to leave St. Louis for Atlanta. And another thing I gotta say is, I think we would look at this Hawks organization much differently than we do. Would he have created a winning culture that would have gave way to future stars on the Hawks? Would this, because a lot of times people want to play for the Boston Celtics because of the honored tradition, the winning culture there. So had the Hawks had this, starting with Bill Russell, do you think this would have been a destination to go to had he won those championships there? I could see it going either way, but it could totally go the other way too. It could theoretically end up being just, they won a bunch of championships in the 60s, but they hadn't really done anything since. But nonetheless, this is the most lopsided trade in history because Celtics had 11 championships out of the deal. The Hawks only had one. And that's it since then. Now, I do think Russell, like I said, would have won championships. My prediction is he would have won 4 or 5 championships with the Hawks. Which still, a lot of franchises don't have that. So it's kind of crazy to think about the impact of this trade and how it changed the NBA history forever and how it even impacts the league today. So, in my opinion, this Hawks Celtics trade is the most lopsided trade in NBA history. And it's probably the most important trade in NBA history. So that's my thoughts. Let me know what you guys think down below. Thanks for watching.